Hey there, good to have you. While we spent already quite some time on installing a plugin and creating the plugin and extending upon the plugin, often it's forgotten on what to do when uninstalling a plugin. Well, uninstalling a plugin is not just removing the source code from Shopware. A plugin is always during the installation and the registration time, it's being actually written away into the database table called plugin. So as soon as we uninstall a plugin, we also want to make sure that that entry from the database is gone as well. And that's why we actually have this procedure up and running. There's this bin console plugin uninstall command, which is going to take care of the database removal. And then actually once that entry is gone from the plugin table, it's safe to remove all other things like files and folders. And either we just do composer remove of that package, or we remove the plugin from the custom plugins folder or the custom static plugins folder or from Shopware store. But that's basically leading into the reversal of whatever we did to install the plugin. Now, the story about uninstalling the plugin is not that much about this command, but it's much more about what else do you want to have removed. Well, removing the files and folders is part of the procedure of, well, Composer or the custom deployment that you have set up or Shopware store. So we don't need to worry about that. But what if instead of just removing that entry from the plugin database table, there's other database stuff that we have to be removing. And that's actually what I'm going to cover in the upcoming slides. So removing data is basically a certain procedure that you could just play by doing stuff within the uninstall method of your plugin bundle. So knowing about your plugin being actually a Symfony bundle, extending upon this class called Shopware Core Framework Plugin, which is again extending upon the Symfony bundle class, one of the methods that we can play with is uninstall. There's an uninstall context as an argument with that, but what could we do basically within this uninstallation? Well, first of all, we could simply just call upon the uninstall parent method. Maybe that's a good step, but as of yet, it's still an empty thing, so there's not much in there. There's just an empty method. But then once we decide upon to remove something, we basically need to agree with the user, the shop owner, and maybe bookkeeping systems, whether data should be removed or they shouldn't. Well, the nice thing about Shopware is that once a plugin is actually removed by using several methods, and I'm going to cover those methods in a bit, but once a plugin is actually removed, there's always this option to keep the user data or not. Now, using this option, keep user data or not, also requires you to call upon this function within the context, keep user data. So just to comply to the option that is there on the command line, but also similarly the option that is there in the administration part, we do want to make sure that that option is actually checked for, so that the administration user or the CLI user is in control of, well, the rest of the steps. And the rest of the steps are kind of straightforward. Within this uninstall procedure, we can refer to the service container. Within the service container, there's this procedure of getting the current database connection. And once we're there with that database connection, we can execute certain queries like drop table if exists, alter table to remove or drop a certain column. And that's basically the data removal that I wanted to talk about. Now, let me actually just move over to the practical side to show you also this flag that I mentioned from the console command, and similarly also the administration option available to you to keep that user data or to remove that user data. So I've opened up the Shopware administration, and let's actually navigate into the settings and then system and then plugins. Here's the overview of all of the different plugins. Well, the plugin that I've been using most in these sessions is the example plugin, which is actually referred to with a label skeleton plugin in this case. And let's say that I actually want to uninstall this plugin. Well, as soon as I'm uninstalling this plugin, I'm actually getting this little pop-up with an option, remove all plugin data permanently or not. So basically this is the flag that I'm referring to. Keep user data in the code is actually referring to this little flag in the administration. Well, that's the administration part, but I also mentioned the console. So let's actually open up PHP Storm and let's open up a little terminal. Earlier I've been playing around with a plugin called Swag Example, and actually if I would run the console and then plugin list, you will see that Swag Example is actually in there. It's labeled here as skeleton plugin. And now what I could do is I could run the command bin console plugin uninstall. And then if I just type in --help, you will see that one of the options out there is --keep user data. In other words, if I would say --keep user data like so, and then the name of my example plugin. Now in this case, actually, I'm going to skip this uninstall procedure because of that check that we've just mentioned in the uninstall method of the bundle. Well, in my case, I didn't put anything there, but theoretically. But if I would have removed that flag, which is kind of like the default, then actually the uninstall method would have proceeded and wiping out the database columns and the database tables as I saw fit. So that's kind of showing what I talked about within this environment of within the environment of the uninstall method within your own Symfony bundle, or within your own plugin class, I should say. I could just check upon that keep user data, referring to that flag in the console or that little toggle box within the administration part. Now, there's another option of removing data, and I wanted to cover that just to have a comparison between the two. Knowing now about this uninstall method within the plugin class, there's actually another one which kind of like resembles the same thing, which is actually uninstalling things by using a migration. Now, it's kind of like an abusing thing that is not identical and it's not entirely the same, but it could make up for a nice discussion. So once you know about a plugin and its migrations, then hopefully this is making more sense. If you don't know about migrations yet, there's a separate lesson on migrations telling the story of how you can add your own database tables, your own other columns that you want to add somewhere. And as soon as you want to add your own structure, I would say that a migration is a better way of doing all of that instead of using the install method that I didn't really cover here. But well, in the previous example, we've seen an uninstall method within our own plugin class. Well, if there's an uninstall method, there's also an install method. A migration is pretty cool because it allows us to migrate the plugin state in the database towards a new state. And every time when you have a new update within your plugin, it's just not equal to an install or an uninstall. It's basically an upgrade that a migration class allows you to upgrade in a certain way. Now, migration tasks are divided into two different groups, either non-destructive actions or destructive actions. A non-destructive action would be to add a new table or to add a new column to the database table. But basically, once you do that and you would like to reverse that same action, it's basically not removing something that wasn't already there. However, with the destructive variation, then we might actually just remove something on purpose. I'm going to talk about migrations more extensively in a separate lesson, and then I'm also going to focus more upon that difference between non-destructive and destructive. But safe to say, if I'm beginning with a situation where my plugin has been installed already and there's a table called example added to it, by running a new migration on top of it and suddenly dropping all of that information, it's a pretty destructive situation. I hope you agree with that. And that's basically the situation I wanted to describe. Now, it could be that in your migration you have a real necessity to do this. That you want to really wipe out that column or that database table called example because maybe there's another database table called example 2. But now from this perspective that we know actually within that in our uninstall procedure that we can also just remove the data if we see fit. My personal impression is that the more we rely upon that uninstall procedure so that the customer or the database user or the console administrator is in charge of determining whether to keep the user data or to remove the user data, my personal belief is actually that this update destructive method maybe could be skipped. So imagine just the scenario that maybe you wanted to have this database table example to be removed. Well, but instead of doing that during an upgrade, during a migration, you could just equally just remove this into the uninstall procedure, meaning also that the database table is only removed when uninstalling the plugin itself. But then still you give the end user more control over when the database is actually modified in a destructive way. While with a migration, there's no way to stop that destructive action. And that's kind of like the point I wanted to get to. So my personal advice would be try to stay away from this method update destructive within migration classes and instead try to use that uninstall mechanism as much as you can, because then the control lies with the user doing that actual uninstallation. But that's it for now. Hopefully I've not driven you that much crazy about this migration part. It is interesting to dive deeper into. So in a separate lesson, I'm going to explain all about migrations and specifically also this difference between the destructive and the non-destructive. So hopefully then it makes a little bit more sense. But other than that, we've at least seen how to uninstall a plugin and that we can also have this flag being set in the administration or from the command line to influence basically whether we want to keep the user data or that we actually want to remove the user data. That's it for now. So thanks for watching and I hope to see you in a bit.